The first storyteller who is coming to the stage is Simon Andrews. He was born in England. He is a composer and conductor, and he is proudly married to the minister of this church. So every day he wakes up pinching himself, wondering how the hell he got so lucky. So, if you will, to the stage, welcome Simon Andrews.
My parents left school at the age of 16. If you know England in the 1950s, that piece of information alone is enough to tell you that they were working class. My grandfather, my mother's father, left school at 14 and went to work at the local gasworks wearing short trousers, but that's a story for another day. One spoken sentence in England at that time was enough to place you geographically and socially. You were defined by your accent and your vocabulary. And while those class lines may have been invisible, they were immutable and omnipresent. My parents were born in London, in Greenwich, which was not then the trendy place it is now. And they only had to open their mouths for the listener to assume a long line of things about them. They left school and went straight to work. My mother was expected to give my grandmother housekeeping as soon as she started earning. But it didn't take her long to realize that the way she spoke would bar her from the better paying jobs. So she decided to change her accent. She would go home every night and practice trying to sound like a BBC announcer. It was hard. She once told me that she would have to run through the sentence she wanted to say in her mind before she said it out loud, so it came out right. I once asked her, "How was that for you? Was it like losing something or gaining something?" Her reply was characteristically pragmatic. She said, "I didn't think about it in those terms. I just did what was necessary." And soon enough, more and better opportunities did come along. But even then, after she met and married my father and my brother and I came along, money was tight. My father worked in non-residential construction, farm buildings and the like. And during the school holidays, if my mother was working, my brother and I would drive with him in between the various jobs he was bidding. One day I remember, I must have been 7 or 8, and we were going through a country town past green lawns that seemed to go on as far as the eye could see, with old ivy-covered Gothic buildings in the distance and boys walking around in school uniform. "What's this place, Dad?" I asked him. And I remember his reply to this day. He said, "That's where rich people send their sons to go to school. Don't get your hopes up. It's not for people like us." A couple of years passed and I began to show a little musical talent, and I won a place to sing in the cathedral choir in Chichester. This meant living away from home, private school. I suspect my socialist grandfather, the one that went to work in short trousers, thought my parents were class traitors. But he was proud of me, and he respected my parents' decision that I should have more opportunities than they had had. By the time I arrived at the school, of course, I had completely forgotten my father's comment, but I do remember the awkwardness of parents' weekends. My friends' mothers and fathers would show up in their Bentleys and Jaguars and stay in the expensive hotels. My parents bought a second-hand tent, stuck it in the back of their old jalopy, and pitched in a field 2 miles out of town. But the worst time was when I overheard somebody say to my father, "We're staying at the Anchor Hotel. Where are you staying?" Far from leaving an embarrassed silence, quick as a flash, my father said in his best BBC accent, "Oh, we're out in the country somewhere." I don't remember the name. My wife made the arrangements. Looking back on it, I like to think that the person who asked the question was just trying to be friendly and was oblivious to the panic my father must have been feeling. But I recognized that panic because I lived with that every day. Now, I don't want to overstate it. 98% of the time, I was just a normal boy doing regular boy things. Everyone sings in the cathedral every day and 3 times on Sundays, right? I didn't give the differences much thought, but every now and then, something would come up that would remind you. A friend taking an expensive holiday, and I had to come up with an excuse for why I couldn't accept his invitation. Not knowing how to tie a bow tie or mispronouncing a word because that was how it was said at home. So even at the age of 13, I was deeply aware of the multi-layered complexities of the concept of belonging. On one level, I belonged at that school. I had won my place by competitive audition. I was near the top of my class. I was head chorister, and I had just won a scholarship to study at a specialist music high school. Again, a private school. But on another level, I didn't belong. In my father's phrase, it wasn't for people like us, or as my grandfather would have said, it's for the toffs. The upper class, a closed system, and I wasn't supposed to be part of it. It wasn't until I had been at the new high school a couple of years before I learned to navigate between those two different kinds of belonging, to value who I was rather than who I wasn't, to value my family roots, not the family connections I didn't have, and to choose my friends depending on what side of that equation they came down. And that private high school, it was the one I had looked at so enviously as an 8-year-old. And far from not being for people like me, I rocked it.